This is the High School Football Preview Show with Mike Wenmacher, Tim Schweitzer, Steve Bridge, and Derek Paris on 97.7 and 970 WMAY, Springfield's News and Talk.
Hard to believe, week 6 of the High School Football Preview Show. I am Mike Wenmacher, joined as always by the panel. Steve Bridge, you can hear him on the Rochester Rockets broadcast on WMAY. Also joined by Tim Schweitzer, hear him on the SHG broadcast on Sports Radio 1450 and 92.3. And he is everywhere you want to be when it comes to high school sports from Channel 1450. It's Derek Paris. And gentlemen, we're going to try something different this week. I'm going to start with you, Derek. I want to ask you, what was your biggest surprise when it comes to results of week 5? Was it Glenwood running clock MacArthur? Was it the blowout of Rochester over U-High, the SHG Lanphier game? What was your biggest surprise from week 5?
It's a great question. I think that you may be surprised by the Glenwood and the Rochester blowouts, but seeing them play each other the week before, we all came away from that game knowing how good both of those teams were, and I don't think that there was any doubt about that. So, yeah, maybe the way that they won was kind of surprising, just in such dominating fashion. But I think you have to turn to the game in Quincy last week, where Springfield High went over there on a short week, so to speak, after playing on a Monday, and then they really picked up a huge win over Quincy Notre Dame on Friday night. And I stopped and talked with Coach Hebb and some of the players this week, and they really felt like they not necessarily dominated that game, but maybe should have won by more than the scoreboard even indicated, based on how well they played in all aspects of the game. So I think if you're pinning me down to one game, I would probably say the Springfield High win over Quincy Notre Dame was kind of the focal point of last week for me.
Well, let's go around then and talk about the other games of all the teams we cover here on the Woodward sister stations and Woodward network of radio stations. So, Tim, I'll start with you. The SHG gets a victory over Lanphier 41-8. It seems maybe a little bit of a hangover after that big win over Quincy, some sloppy play a little bit, it seemed like, for the Cyclones in that ball game.
Might be part of it, Mike, and also Lanphier's having a real struggle this season to get anything going, offense, defense. Sacred Heart Griffin was sloppy during the game, committed a lot of penalties, 13 penalties to 3 for Lanphier. It was just, there was no real flow to the game. The Cyclones got the running clock going early in the second half, and it just got to its finish, and everybody was glad it got to its finish with no one seriously hurt.
You mentioned something too, Tim. You've been talking about SHG struggling with injuries throughout the season. Was that part of it too, of them still trying to figure out where they are and who fits where for that team?
Given that it was a lopsided game, you had kids still being plugged into positions they hadn't had much experience in, and as a consequence, that contributed to some of the penalties and sloppy play for sure. But the Cyclones, they're getting better each week. Didn't show it much last week. Have a game with Southeast in which they'll be heavily favored on week 6, and then the tough part of the schedule arrives with Springfield High, and then Glenwood, and then Rochester finish up the regular season.
Yeah, a bit of a murderer's row for SHG down the stretch, that's for sure. So, Steve, let's go to you and Rochester. An emotional game. I think they have it in the fourth quarter, leading by 2 touchdowns against Glenwood. They lose in overtime, but they really bounce back in an impressive way with that victory over Nomore U-High.
They just simply handle themselves and handle business as best as could have been wished for, really, I think, out of what the Rochester coaching staff really wanted in that game, Mike. As you say, you got to figure out how you're going to bounce back, how are you going to rebound, are you going to be focused, are you going to be thinking about, the loss or where the mindset might be. The Rockets, at least by the result on the scoreboard and the stat sheet, show that they have nothing to worry about. They handled the U-High Pioneers it was an all phases type of game, from offense, defense, special teams. They just really shut down everything that the Pioneers wanted to do with their defense. And then offensively, it was almost a perfect night passing, whether it was Tanner Beal or whether it was JP Leonard. They were 14 of 19, and there were 2 clear drops in the game even. So that might be 16 to 19, and maybe you don't even need to throw a couple of those other passes, because they might have gone for one, probably would have gone for a touchdown had they held on to the ball. So Rochester just really looked good in all aspects up there at Hancock Stadium, and took care of their business.
Well, and you just said something about Beal and Leonard. Do you get the feeling as we get into week 6 here of the roles being clearly kind of defined within the offense for Rochester?
That's a question that on the morning huddle with Darren Pritchett this morning, Darren asked play-by-play man Chris McLeod. He doesn't have an answer. You're asking me the question now, Mike. I don't have an answer. I'm not sure, as we talk to Derek Leonard every week, always, if he knows exactly the answer. I think the roles are kind of defined, more or less, but exactly who plays when, how long, all the situations, I think that is still an evolving process. And at the very least, if it's all been defined, I'm going to tell you that I can't answer that just yet because I'm not privy to all that information, I guess.
Well, how about defensively? What stood out for you the most as far as that part of the unit? We talk a lot about offense because it's, we see in the highlights, but defensively, what have you seen from the Rochester Rockets, especially in that game against U High, holding them to just 7 points?
Well, it was, and the Rochester defense, the starters would like to probably remind everybody that the 7 points was scored after major substitutions were made. They just got it in right at the end of, in fact, it was the very last play. Time expired on the Pioneers as they made their touchdown. What stands out, though, again, is relentless pressure on the quarterback, a constant presence of linemen and linebackers in the backfield. It was also 2 forced fumbles, 1 recovery for the Rocket defense. So they stripped the quarterback once. They made another great play and punched another ball out on a ball carrier once. And so just that defense has been relentless up front. And the quicker you get to the quarterback, the less you have to cover wide receivers. And also what stood out in that game, kind of like against the Titans, although the outcome was different, right? But Blake Lanen was, I think, the number 2, number 3 wide receiver going into that game in the conference. And he was not much of a factor. Got the ball a couple times for sure, but he wasn't what beat the Rockets in that game. They played very good pass defense against Lanen as they pressured Knadler. And then last week, Cade Cunningham was the number 1 wide receiver in the Central State 8. He barely shows up on the stat sheet because they pressured Kirby and they covered Cunningham all night long. So the Rockets have been able to, at the right time, take really kind of some of the main threats away from teams that they played. Now the Harvey kid from Mount Zion, maybe got everybody to readjust and rethink about what their defense was going to be because he was electric in that week 2 game. But the last couple of weeks, the Rockets have really, really done a good job matching up against some primary offensive talents defensively and kind of taking them a bit out of the game.
Before I get into the stuff on the field for the Glenwood Titans victory over Decatur MacArthur, I want to ask Derek real quick. What do you think of the new jerseys for the Glenwood Titans debuting, going with the black jerseys for the first time ever against Decatur MacArthur?
Yeah, they were pretty impressive. When I saw that, Michael posted the picture before the game of them in the black jerseys, and then some of the coaches sent me some pictures. I was really impressed, and I think that they all like them a lot. I think that I talked to Caitlin Moody over at Glenwood earlier this week when I was over there for a different interview, and she was like, yeah, we were probably going to wear them, week 6 for, homecoming, but they came early and the kids were just itching to get them on. And so she said, go ahead and wear them. And I think they all loved them and they looked great.
Yeah, when I talked to Coach Hay earlier this morning, I said, look like the Georgia Bulldogs. And he said, that's exactly what they kind of paired it off of. Even the numbers, the way it is on the jersey, they were trying to compare themselves to Georgia in that respect. So good eye there. And yeah, the kids were super excited for it. As far as the game itself, the thing that Coach really stressed to me, which I thought was interesting, was they had circled the MacArthur game and the U High game before the season started, because last year when they got the big victory over Rochester, they did not play well the next 2 weeks and U High got them. And they wanted to make sure that wasn't the case this time around. And when you have that many seniors, it was almost businesslike. Efficient was the word that Coach Hay used. In fact, at halftime, he said Coach Lanen and himself, Coach Lanen was like, well, that was an efficient half. And so while being a running clock over a 4-0 MacArthur team may be surprising to some, it wasn't surprising to the guys in that room and the way they go about their business and look at each thing. And the fact that they had that circled before the season started, I thought was very, very interesting. We also talked about the depth at the running back position that they're starting to kind of build. And part of that is because they had the score in which they had, but you're going to need more weapons in the backfield. You can't really have just the one workhorse anymore because eventually they may break down. So that's something Coach also really kind of stressed in the fact that to get where they need to go, at some point, Grady Mueller is going to have to get spelled, and you want to make sure that there's always a weapon in that backfield, and they've been able to do that with that victory over Decatur MacArthur. So let's go to the games then this week, and Tim, we'll go back to you. You mentioned kind of sloppy against Lanphier. I imagine what the coaching staff is stressing this week is clean that up against the Southeast team.
There's no doubt. And with Southeast having the full complement of players back after the suspensions that followed the fight, and they were short players last week, they'll come over and they'll be ready to play. And the Spartans have trouble at times against teams that outnumber them, which is just about everybody in terms of roster depth. And so the Cyclones are heavily favored, but they're not taking it lightly against Southeast. They know Tony Boyd is a dynamic player at quarterback. Easton McGlathery is a boom, boom, bam, bam running back and a good defender. One of the problems Southeast has is that everybody plays both ways, and they just run out of gas as the game goes on. Cyclones may try to take advantage of that by doing some pounding running and passing when Cam Brinkman thinks that's a good idea.
Derek, you talk to these coaches throughout the week. What is something you're hearing from SAG as they enter into this game against Southeast?
I think Tim kind of hit it on the head. It's the discipline aspect and staying healthy and making sure that they're cleaning everything up and getting ready for the like you said, the final stretch of their regular season schedule, and really just making sure that Cam Brinkman is continuing to progress. And I think all systems seem to be a go in terms of him being able to run the ball and throw the ball. So I think it's really just kind of discipline and staying healthy.
Steve, the Rochester Rockets, I hate to say, sometimes you look for a get-right game. They had that against U-High, but they come up now against Decatur Eisenhower. And I'm sure as you talk to Coach Leonard, you hear the coach speak all the time of a week like this, it's about making sure you're doing the right things.
Absolutely. And this probably is the last game the Rockets will play against a team with a potential losing record. So this is really it for the Rockets. It's a chance to not necessarily go easy in practice or in the game, but take a step back, get a lot of extra players in, make sure you get in and out of it healthy, and otherwise just really kind of keenly be aware of how you're preparing and what you're doing here to get ready for Eisenhower. It's a game, again, kind of like the SHG game that they had last week, in particular against Lanphier, and then here against Southeast, where you just want to be as prepared and as disciplined as possible. You just want to make sure that you are ready to go. And then games like this, although they do oftentimes turn into running clocks, can set the stage for success and good things to happen for the rest of the year.
Well, and I think, Tim have hit upon it, and Steve, you're mentioning it too. The one thing you don't want to have happen is bad habits, right? You want to make sure you're still playing a clean game and not, you can, against the Lanphier or an Eisenhower, you can get away with certain things you can against better opponents. And I imagine that's what the coaching staff is making sure doesn't happen as well in this ball game.
No, everybody will be held accountable in the game, and especially by the time the tape is played on Saturday and looked at again on Sunday. And they will be, you're always aware of what your bad habits are and how you need to fix those, and then get ready for the rest of the year, which for, both for SHG and for spring, and pardon me, for Rochester is a bit of a meat grinder. I mean, everybody else up is remaining with winning marks and winning schedules. So there's a lot of good football still left to be played in the CS8.
That there is. And for the Glenwood Titans, I mentioned it in the recap kind of Decatur MacArthur. It's kind of the same mindset of circling these 2 weeks and realizing you don't want to have a letdown after you get that big victory against Rochester. So I'm sure in the back of this team's mind is we got to make up for what happened last year at U-High. It's going to be very much a business-like mentality. It's going in there, it's taking care of business, it's making sure you defend your home field. U-High, though, as Coach Hay said, they still have some weapons. Obviously, Rochester was able to minimize it in their victory last week, but every week is different when you have high school kids. You never know what's going to happen out on that field. The other thing he really pointed out was U-High throws a lot of different multiple looks defensively. And luckily for the Glenwood Titans, they have a 3-year starting quarterback in Colton Knadler there in the backfield, able to kind of decipher that. There's not much he has not seen thus far in his 3 years. So I'm looking for the Glenwood Titans. I don't know if it'll be the same kind of thing that we saw against Decatur MacArthur. I can't say that. But what I can say is you're going to see a team who is focused, who is ready, who knows where they want to go, and has in the back of their mind what happened to them last year, and they definitely don't want that to happen again. Derek, what do you see from the Rochester and Glenwood games? What are you looking for most in those two matchups that seem to be possibly on paper somewhat lopsided?
Yeah, I think that's safe to say, but I think, Glenwood is obviously very focused on making sure that what happened last year doesn't happen again, where I remember going up to U-High for that game last year and, walking into that game, I think Glenwood on the sideline kind of felt like, hey, we're just going to walk through this game, and quickly got punched in the mouth, and they were down 2 touchdowns in a hurry, and then there was scramble, and then it was kind of too late. And we saw how good that U-High team was last year, so we kind of understand it at the end of the season. But I mean, Glenwood's going to be very focused on making sure to win this game. It's homecoming. It's going to be an exciting night in Chatham, so I think that they'll definitely be very focused. And yeah, as for Rochester, I think I was so impressed with them last week, and I didn't expect to leave before halftime of that game, but got a chance to get on the road early because just how clean and how effective they were on both sides, really all sides of the ball, to where, man, everything was clicking, and they look like a well-polished machine coming off of a very emotional, very physical game against Glenwood. So I look for both of these teams to really capitalize on the opportunity to, play a game that you are expected to win and really show what they're capable of as we look, start to look toward the playoff picture.
Yeah, hard to believe that's about a month away, the playoffs. So, gentlemen, have great broadcasts here for week 6 of the high school football preview show. Have great broadcasts this weekend. Tim, where can people find the SHG Cyclone Southeast game?
As always, on Sports Radio 1450 AM and 92.3 FM, sportsradio1450.com, and the Sports Radio 1450 app.
Steve, where's the Rochester Rockets broadcast?
97.7 FM and on the WMAY app and WMAY.com.
Yep, the Glenwood game's at 9:70 a.m. On WMAY, also the app and at WMAY.com. And Derek, where are you guys going to be at? I know you're always everywhere, but where are you going to be at this weekend?
Yeah, our big game of the week is in Williamsville for Athens Williamsville. Athens is 4-1, Williamsville 5-0, so a huge Sagamo game there. And then we'll also have, highlights from Chatham, from SHG, from Decatur with the Rochester, and then we'll look for the Springfield High Jacksonville game as well, because that's kind of an important one in the CS8.
That it is, as we go through week 6 here in the high school football preview show. Thanks again, guys. Have a great weekend, and we'll be back next week for week 7 of the high school football preview show.
Catch the High School Football Preview Show live every Friday night at 6 on 97.7 and 970 WMAY. Listen to the podcast and watch the replay online at WMAY.com.